Alright, let's get started. So, last week we finished with the epsilon delta criterion for
Proving
continuity. Yeah, for proving that something's continuous. And then I did a quick example proof proving that some function, it was like that x cubed was continuous at the point 2 or something like that. And it showed you how you'd use that definition to prove continuity. You remember?
I don't remember the cube function because
You don't remember when there was a side thing we did using that criterion, we did a proof that f of x equal to x cubed is continuous at x equal to 2.
I don't remember that.
Okay, so we started out, we need to get our epsilon. Let epsilon be any number greater than 0. Now, double check, I'm pretty sure.
Do we have a black marker?
Not a good one. Can you see this better than you can see this? Because the black marker's dynamic.
Wait,
So-
no, should I go get you one?
The black
Red,
marker
red,
is
green.
way better.
You can't see the red very good?
I can see it.
I can't see very good.
Where's the green marker? Can you see this better?
I mean, your camera quality is better than YouTube quality, so.
It,
Way better.
want to go there?
Yeah.
No, I could hardly see it on the camera. Your red, the red's way better on the camera.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're on with camera. I'm not that worried about my students. Worried about random people on the internet who might come across us. So let epsilon greater than 0. Try out with some positive number. Now, let's wrap our head around the epsilon delta criterion again. So make sure that this makes perfect sense to you, because chances are when you go and do calculus at university, then this is the definition that they're going to use for continuous. So you need to be very comfortable. So what does it say? It says if we have some real value function, then it's continuous, or it satisfies the epsilon delta criterion at some point x naught. It's continuous at x naught, provided that for any positive number you pick, there is some positive delta, some delta greater than 0. They're both positive numbers because they're both distances. There exists delta greater than 0, such that for any point in the domain, if the distance between these 2 points is less than delta, then the distance between these 2 images is less than epsilon. If 2 points in the domain are within delta of each other, then 2 points in the image are within epsilon of each other. So pick any small number here. I can always find a small number here, such that when this is true, then this is true. So the whole trick to these problems is trying to come up with your delta, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now I need to find the delta so that when x minus 2 is less than delta, then x cubed minus 8 is less than epsilon.
This is where you did your 1 over 19.
Right, and I told you it was going to be kind of arbitrary to begin with. So I said something like 2, let's see if it was 19, I can't remember if it was, but say something like, let delta equal the min of 1 and epsilon over 19. We'll change these numbers if it turns out we need to change it in the end. Something like that. Then, and remember that this is less than delta. So let delta be that. And maybe say something like, and note, maybe say this. And assume x minus 2 is less than delta. Right? So So I'm saying that when this is true, this is true. That's what I need to prove. If this is true, then this is true. How do we prove an if-then statement?
Prove it first.
Assume the condition and show that implies a conclusion. So now, assume the condition. We need to show that implies a conclusion.
Okay.
So then, our conclusion is x cubed minus 8, and I'm going to do a bunch of algebra, but in the end I'm going to get is less than epsilon, and I'm done. That's what this says. It says that when this is true, then this less than epsilon is true. That's what I'm proving.
It's all come back.
Alright? So now we just do algebraic manipulation.
Okay, real quick question. On line 2, on your and assume, on other proofs, is it just what's obviously, or do we just find some random, arbitrary, easy to understand assumption for x minus 2 is less than delta?
You're always going to assume this.
I know, but why'd you choose 2?
I'm proving it's continuous at 2. My x naught is 2.
Oh.
At x naught equal to 2.
There we go. Yeah, I missed that.
So this is x minus x naught is right here. And f of x minus f of x naught is right here.
Right. I see.
So I need to prove that when this is true, then this is true. This less than epsilon is true. You with me? Okay. So now it's algebraic manipulation. Obviously, I want an x minus 2 coming out of this somehow. Well, that's nice because it just factors right now. That gives me an x minus 2 times, let's see, what's that going to leave me with?
X squared.
X squared plus 2x plus 4. Did I do that right? We get x cubed 2x squared 4x minus 2x squared minus 4x minus 8. Yeah. Right? Now, maybe show some of the, where should I put the side work? Here's the side work I should have plugged in there somehow. Since, maybe I'll just put it in above here, because I think that we'll use later on, and then we'll go in. Since x minus 2 is less than delta, then x minus 2 is less than 1, right? Because delta is the minimum of these two things.
Right.
Which gives me that 1 is less than x is less than 3. Gives me that x is in between 1 and 3.
Wait, why 3 again?
Just expand that out.
Right, okay.
You with me? You understand how this implies this? Good? Now continue with what I was doing. Then x cubed minus 8 is equal to x minus 2 times x squared plus 2x plus 4 is less than or equal to, the biggest x can be is 3, so what do we get when we plug in 3? We get 9 plus 6 plus 4 is 19. So the biggest that this part can be is 19. So that's less than or equal to, I'm going to write the 19 first. 19 times the absolute value of x minus 2, right? Now, x minus 2 is less than delta, which is going to be either equal to or less than this thing, right?
Right.
So this is less than 19 times epsilon over 19 is equal to epsilon. And we're done.
It has to be less than epsilon.
This is equal to, is less than or equal to, is less than epsilon.
Okay. Wait. X minus 2 has to be less than delta.
X minus 2 is less than delta.
And delta's the
and delta is the minimum of these two things. So I know x minus 2 is less than 1, and I know x minus 2 is less than epsilon over 19. That makes sense? Any questions on that?
Is this section 3.5?
Yes.
So we're redoing section 3.5?
We barely got into it last time.
Yeah.
I was going to start from where we left off, but you guys didn't remember what we did before, so.
Is this where we left off?
Yeah.
3.5.
Yeah, this is 3.5. The epsilon delta factor. So now the question is, so that was just an example of using this criterion. And we kind of assumed it was true that this is the same as continuous. Now we need to prove that this is the same thing as continuous. So that's the next thing we're going to do.
Okay.
You understand what I mean by that?
This was the definition.
In other words,
If and if.
yeah, f of x is continuous if and only if it satisfies, maybe we'll do it at 20, is continuous at x naught if and only if it satisfies the epsilon delta criterion at x naught. So prove that these two, that this and the definition of continuous that we have are logically equivalent.
Okay.
Okay? Which way should we go first?
The first f of x.
Let's prove that if f of x is continuous, then it satisfies the epsilon delta definition. Give it that, or criterion, sorry. So 1. Let f from D to R, where f is continuous. Now what does it mean for it to be continuous?
All the limit of all
Continuous at x naught in D, comma, and let's get our sequence. And let xn in D such that the limit of xn is equal to x naught. Good with that so far? Okay, now what do we need to do? We need to show that for every epsilon, there is a delta such that when this is true, then this is true.
Okay. But wait, that's not our first. We haven't written the first definition of continuity that we first learned.
Yeah, what was the definition of continuity?
It was if limit of all.
If the limit of xn equals x naught, then the limit of f of xn equals f of x naught. Right? So we need to use that fact in our proof.
Okay.
So in other words, behind the scenes, here's what I'm keeping in my mind. I now know that the limit of f of xn is equal to f of x naught. That's why I now know in my head that I get to use from here on out, because I know f's continuous.
Okay.
And I need to use that to show that for any epsilon you pick, I can find a delta such that when this is true, this is true.
Okay. Yeah, well,
So,
probably write the definition of.
How do you know f is continuous?
that's what I'm using. I am showing that if f is a continuous function, then it satisfies the epsilon delta criterion.
So you're saying let f be continuous?
Yeah, let f from D to R, where f is continuous, at some point in D. Maybe I should have put this piece of logic on another line, because because we're kind of doing two things at once. I'm setting up my thinking as I go. That's what it is. We're going to do a proof by contradiction. We're going to assume by way of contradiction that F does not satisfy the epsilon delta criterion. So assume by way of contradiction that, what is the contradiction of this?
If you have a delta, that is, x minus x naught is greater than delta.
So the contradiction of this is that there is some epsilon such that for any delta you choose, this is never true. That's the contradiction of this.
Okay.
Are you good with that?
Not really.
It's kind of like what we did from discrete math. Let's look at a simpler one real quick. I say there exists x so that for all y, x times y equals y. Is that statement true? Let's look at a really simple statement. Does there exist an x such that for any y you pick, x times y equals y?
Yes.
What is it? 1. What's the contradiction of this?
2.
What? The contradiction of this is that for any x you pick, there is not a y such that x times y is equal to y. That is not true. So for any x you pick, there exists a y such that this is the case. This is a contradiction of this.
Okay.
Can you follow the logic of these two in your head?
Yeah. So for any the top.
This says that there is an x such that for any y, x times y equals y.
I'm saying for.
We know that's 1.
There is.
1 times anything is that thing. We're saying it, now here we're saying the contradiction of that. This one's a false statement. This is saying that for any x you pick, then there's going to be a y that makes this statement.
Yeah, that's false.
Or this statement not true. This is a false statement. That's not true. If I pick 1, then any y you pick makes the statement true.
Okay.
This is a contradiction of this. So how do we contradict F for all? We do it there exists. How do we contradict there exists? We do it for all. So there exists an epsilon
Not for all delta.
such that for all delta, this does not imply this. The not of this statement now. Right? The same way we noted this, we went from this to this.
Yeah.
The real way you've kind of seen this maybe is some statement about x and y, and then the not of some statement about x and y. This is the negation of that. Maybe something like that you see. Making sense there? Okay, so that's exactly what the contradiction of this is. Assume by way of contradiction that the epsilon delta criterion does not hold. What does that mean? That means then there exists some epsilon such that for all delta how do I want to say does not imply? This leads to not this. Oh, what's the not of this? it's this. Right?
Right.
So now this implies this.
It's the same thing as that.
Is the negation of this statement.
Yeah.
You with me on that? So then there exists some epsilon such that for all delta, x minus x naught less than delta implies f of x minus f of x naught is greater than or equal to epsilon. You follow me on that?
Yeah.
Okay, so since this should hold, we're leading to contradiction, right? Where do I have choice? Maybe see if you can kind of see where we're going with this. There exists an epsilon such that for any delta, this should hold.
You gotta pick a delta.
I gotta find a delta where it doesn't hold.
Okay.
For all.
Yeah. So we're assuming by way of contradiction that there is some epsilon out there such that for any delta I pick, this will always be the case. And it won't always be the case. I may pick a delta that makes so it's not the case. And just pick a delta that goes to 0. Well, I don't want to say that. Then for all n, I'm not sure how I want it. I want my delta to be 1 over n, and that would work for any n I pick. So here's what I'm getting at. Tell me if this is confusing.
Could you just pick a delta?
Yeah, so the delta can be 1 over n, and we can use any n in there that we want because we can use any delta that we want. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. And for all n in the natural numbers, right?
Yeah, so here's where I'm getting off. Get rid of this, get rid of this, get rid of this. We're creating our sequence right now. So for each n, let's say it this way. For all n, define xn such that xn minus x naught less than 1 over n. Maybe just leave it like that. So we're defining our sequence xn. What's our xn? It's the x that makes this true for a particular n. So when you plug in 1, x1 is what you would plug here to make this less than 1. When you plug in 2, x2 is what you would plug in here to make this less than 1/2. Do you see a sequence I'm defining?
Yeah.
And what does that xn converge to?
0.
No, it doesn't converge to 0.
Oh, xn. Wait. Why not?
What's the limit of xn?
X naught.
X naught, there you go. So there we go. I just just barely made a sequence xn that converges to x naught, right? Because I can make this distance arbitrarily small. You understand how this is enough information to know that the limit of this is that? What's the definition of converges?
The distance got arbitrarily small.
That's intuition for it.
Right. But your B, or is it your A?
If we can make this as small as we want, then this thing converges to that thing. Is a high level way of saying it. Well, I'll update you real quick. Okay. We're creating our sequence xn. So I'm defining my sequence xn as the numbers that make this inequality true. So x sub 1 is a number such that x sub 1 minus x naught is less than 1 over 1. X sub 2 is a number such that x sub 2 minus x naught is less than 1 over 2. X sub 3 is a number such that x sub 3 minus x naught is less than 1/3, etc., right? So I'm defining my xn that way. And then notice that xn, what does xn converge to?
0. Well,
xn minus x naught converges to 0.
Yeah.
What does xn converge to?
it's always growing, isn't it?
No.
I
It
don't-
converges to x naught
Oh, right.
because that distance goes to 0.
Right, yeah.
Right. Okay. So now we have a sequence xn that converges to x naught. Since we know that f is continuous, that gives us this. Six. Then the limit of f of xn is equal to f of x naught. Or in other words, this converges to this.
You can rewrite that.
Or in other words, for all epsilon, there exists an n such that f of xn minus f of x naught
It's greater than or equal to
is less than epsilon. This is a side note. What does it mean for this to converge to this? The definition of that is that there exists some n such that this is true for all n greater than or equal to that n. I'm going to erase this part over here, but I just want you to understand what exactly this says.
Right.
If the limit of this equals this, that's the same thing as this right here. For any small number you pick, there's an index such that from that index onwards, this distance is less than
And we
epsilon.
knew all that because this function is continuous, correct? And we used our first criteria.
Right. Well, hold on. We created a sequence xn, right?
Right.
We know that this is true because it's continuous.
Right.
And the limit of this equaling this, that's what this right here says. I just wrote the definition of the limit right there of a sequence. That's what the limit of the sequence is.
Right. That's a direct contradiction to up there.
Which contradicts this. Anytime this is true, this should be true.
Right.
So now erase this mess. I was just rewriting out what it meant for the limit of that to be that.
Aren't we done?
Yeah. Which contradicts
Line 2.
and now we're done with the first way. Do you follow the logic there?
Yep. Now we can do the other
You see why this contradicts this part of the statement? Because if this converges to this, then this distance from some index onwards is going to get less than epsilon. There's going to come a point where it gets less than epsilon. So it can't be greater than or equal to epsilon for all x.
Right.
You good? Sorry, that was a lot more talking explanation than writing explanation. But I just want to make that clear. Okay, so now we need to do it the other way, right? So we know that if it's continuous and it satisfies the epsilon delta definition, what about the other way? If it satisfies the epsilon delta definition, is it still continuous?
That seems like it's going to be easier. Because we already have our F naughts and F x naughts and F x.
So now let F from D to R, where F satisfies the epsilon delta. Now remember what the epsilon delta gives us. It says that for any epsilon you pick, maybe erase this stuff right here now so that we're not confusing. It says that for any epsilon you pick, I can always find a delta so that when this is true, then this is true. Okay? That's the information that we're going to use. We need to show that F is continuous. So we need to start out with a sequence in the domain, xn, that converges to xn in the domain. And we need to prove
That their distances.
that, well, here's ultimately where I need to go. So let xn in D such that the limit of xn equals x naught. Oh, and I should say this satisfies that point. Let F from D to R where F satisfies the epsilon delta at x naught, right? At a point. It's at a point. So let this be a function that satisfies the epsilon delta at some point x naught. And now let xn and D be some sequence that converges to x naught. Now our goal is to show that the limit of f of xn equals f of x naught. Right? We're trying to show it's continuous. It's easy.
Or, sorry, I see we already knew it's continuous.
So, 9, let epsilon be any positive number. We need to find a delta so that when this is true, then this is true. Good? Oh no, that's what we have. Sorry. We're guaranteed that there's one. Keep you confusing which way I'm going. Let epsilon greater than 0. Yes. Then I know that there exists delta such that x minus x naught less than delta implies f of x minus f of x naught less than epsilon. Sorry, let's switch there. Let's just write it there. Then there exists some delta greater than 0 such that the absolute value of x minus x naught less than delta implies the absolute value of f of x minus f of x naught is less than epsilon. So let's think where I'm trying to go with this. I'm trying to get, when this is all said and done, that the limit of f of x naught is equal, not f of x naught, f of x xn is equal to f of x naught. I know I will have gotten there when I can show that there exists some index n such that f of xn minus f of x naught is less than epsilon for all n greater than or equal to n. Let's think. So let's see. I know that xn converges to x naught. Since xn converges to x naught, then there exists an n such that xn minus x naught is less than delta for all n greater than or equal to n, right?
Yeah.
That's the definition of converging, right?
Yeah.
It converges if for any positive number you pick, there comes a point in the sequence where from that index onwards, their distance is less than that positive number. Then, f of xn minus f of x naught
Converges to epsilon.
is less than epsilon for all n greater than or equal to. Right? Anytime this is true, then this is true because it satisfies the epsilon delta criterion.
And we're using that to prove the other way around, right? Okay.
Well, now we're done, right? Therefore, the limit of f of xn is equal to f of x naught. This is a good little proof because it's making us go back to our first definition of that convergence of a limit.
Makes sense. But couldn't you have just said that down there? Oh wait, you can't use something to prove something.
Right. So remember, we can't use that this is continuous. That's what we're proving. Maybe I should have said it, therefore f is continuous. Should have been my last line. But we were trying to prove that the limit of this equals this. That's how we would have known it was continuous, right?
Right.
What does it mean for the limit of this to equal this? That means that for any epsilon you pick, there is an index in the sequence such that from that index onwards, this distance is less than that small number you pick. That is the exact definition of a limit of a sequence.
Right. And when
You
you're
remember that?
We know a function is continuous when the limit of the function of the sequence equals the function of the limit of the sequence.
I don't know if you guys are getting it. Did you give me like a blank looks, but you're also not saying anything? What's confusing? Is there anything in there that's weird? Taking it line by line, everything makes perfect sense. questions? Are you still just soaking it in? What's going on? Okay, well, while you do that, let me find the next definition, start writing it up. I guess you don't have any questions for me.
It's actually pretty simple proof.
Ready? Okay. So the same way that we have this epsilon delta criterion that is the same thing as continuous, we have something similar to the epsilon delta criterion that turns out is the same thing as uniformly continuous. We remember uniformly continuous?
Not so much.
It's continuous. It has no peaks.
Not it has no peaks.
But it should off to infinity is what I'm saying.
The idea was, if I bound the domain to some interval, I can also bound the range to some interval.
Okay.
In other words, I can't pick a domain such that I can't pick a length of the domain such that anywhere in the domain the range is bounded. It is bounded. Now I don't know how to say.
I was going to say.
Did I say that backwards?
For every point in the domain, then
For any small distance you pick, there is a big distance you can also pick, such that the change in the function over that small interval is never more than that big number I picked. It's bounded in some way, how much it changes. That was uniformly continuous. And then we had our exact definition of uniformly continuous, which was if you have two sequences in the domain that converge so that their distance converges to 0, then
Oh, is this
the distance of their images, it was this. So if un minus vn, if the limit of this, something like, if the limit of this is equal to 0, then the limit of f of un minus f of un equal to 0. So if that's always the case, then the function is uniformly continuous. was the actual definition, but we have our intuition for how we think about how to interpret that. And see the parallel here. So with this in mind, let's go over what this is saying and then we'll do an example of it. So if we have a function f from d to r, it's said to satisfy the epsilon delta criterion on the domain D, provided that for any epsilon you pick, for any positive epsilon, there exists some delta such that if the distance between any 2 points in the domain is less than delta, then the distance of any 2 points in the image is less than epsilon.
Okay.
So such that for any 2 points you pick, this is the case. You with me on that?
Yeah.
And you can see the,
However, I do feel like it's the exact same proof.
it's very, very similar. It's almost the exact same proof as what we just did to prove that those were the same.
But the difference is,
Well, the difference is here we've got two sequences instead of a sequence and a point.
right, excellent.
I mean, that you can kind of view as a special case of this, right? If we replace this sequence with just x naught, because that's a valid sequence, just x naught, x naught, x naught, x naught, then it would be the
This
same
is
thing.
like a more general proof. However,
This
without-
gives you, no, not more general.
we're not dealing with sequences up there. Is U and V implied sequences?
No, they're just any 2 points in the domain.
Right.
This one comes closer to what I told you our intuition was for it. I said, look, if the distance between 2 points in your domain is less than some number, then the distance between the image is also less than that number. The image never shoots to some great... The distance between 2 points in the image is always bounded.
Right.
There is some number that we can find to bound that distance. Okay, so turns out that's logically equivalent to uniformly continuous. That's not a proof that we do. The author leaves that for you as an exercise and gives you, and you have this proof to help you figure out how to construct that proof. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Why we?
So this.
Oh.
Okay.
But it is logically equivalent to uniformly continuous. So now let's do a quick proof. An example. Let's see, prove f of x equal to x cubed. Oh, sorry. Start with its domain. F from 0 to 20 to r by f of x equals x cubed is uniformly continuous. Okay, so one, observe that the absolute value of f of u minus f of b is equal to the absolute value of u cubed minus b cubed is equal to, factor out our u minus b,
0 minus 400.
times 0 minus 400.
Isn't that our U's and V's?
No. Sorry. I didn't specify where U and V come from. U and V are just 2 points in there.
Oh.
They're just two random points in the domain. So when this is true, then this is true, then this is true, u squared plus 2uv plus v squared. Now, the biggest this could possibly be is when both u and v are 20, right?
Yeah.
So, what is that?
400 plus 400.
400 times 4, right?
Oh, yeah. That's fast.
So, that's 1600 times u minus v. Double check that. That's a number.
400 plus 400 plus 400.
1200.
Yeah,
Did I do my thinking right?
it's times 8. Isn't it? 400 plus 400.
400 times 3.
No, that doesn't make sense.
No, that doesn't make sense.
Because UV is just another UV squared.
20 times 20 is 400, right?
Right.
20 times 20 is 400. 20 times 20 is 400. That's 800 plus 800 is 1600.
Did you factor out wrong? Oh, U minus V times
Oh, sorry.
plus, wouldn't that be 0 times that, by the way?
Plus, there we go. We're just coming up with an alphabet. Oh, I wrote equals. This is less than or equal, sorry. Less than or equal. And now it's 1200. Okay, that was our mistake. Yeah, I factored that wrong. Shouldn't be a 2 there. Okay. That's better.
Wait, you said that. Don't U and V have to be different points in our domain, though?
Huh?
It just have to be 2 points in the right.
Don't they have to be 2 different points?
No, they're just 2 points in the domain.
And the highest they can get is 20.
And kind of did this backwards. And for
Yeah, sure.
epsilon greater than 0, define delta equal to epsilon over 1200. Right?
What is the 1200 from?
This is always less than or equal to this, because the biggest this thing can be is 1200. Because u and v are just 2 points out of the domain. The biggest they can be is 20. So the biggest that this can be is 1200. So this is always less than or equal to this. So for any epsilon you pick, just to find delta equal to this. Then this is less than epsilon. Maybe spell that out. Then u minus v less than delta implies f of u minus f of v is less than epsilon.
Right.
You see it? Nothing weird? What about you two?
Here's where I'm confused.
Okay.
Okay. So we're trying to, this uniformly continuous is destroying me because it seems like all we just did was prove that it was continuous, not it was uniform.
Remember,
Okay.
you said that up there, we're going to prove that that means uniform.
Yeah, so you're going to do a proof in your homework that this is the same thing as uniformly continuous. The same way that this is the same thing as continuous.
Okay.
So when we were proving that this was uniformly continuous, instead of using the definition of uniformly continuous, which is that if the limit of un minus vn equals 0, then the limit of f of un minus f of vn equals 0. That's the definition of uniformly continuous. We use this criterion instead, since it's logically equivalent to it. So I was using this to prove that this function is uniformly continuous.
Okay.
That's all I was doing.
How does the absolute value of u cubed minus v cubed equal that?
Multiply it out.
Would we
I mean, forget the absolute values for a second. u cubed minus v cubed is equal to u minus v times u squared plus uv plus v squared. Let's distribute the u. What do we get? We get u cubed plus u squared v plus uv squared, right? Now distribute the minus v. We get minus v times u squared is minus u squared v. Negative v times that gives us negative u v squared. Negative v times that gives us negative v cubed. Add it all together, and what do you get?
U cubed minus v cubed.
Ah, so this is the same as that.
What's that obsession with the
And then
keyboard?
And then you plug in 24 u or v.
And then, well, notice we switch from an equals to a less than or equals.
Yeah.
The biggest, look, u and v are numbers in here.
Okay, I understand that.
So what's the biggest u can be?
20.
What's the biggest v can be?
20.
So what's the biggest this whole thing can be?
1200.
Okay. So this whole thing is less than 1200 times u minus v. I swapped those two positions. Good.
Then for epsilon, for a positive epsilon, define delta by, define delta equals epsilon over 1200. Okay, then the third step.
So now we're combining. So if u minus v is less than delta,
Okay?
then that means u minus v, that means I can plug in delta. I can say that this is now less than 1200 times delta, right? Since u minus v is less than delta.
Okay?
But what is delta?
Okay, I see it now.
You're saying since u minus v is less than delta, the biggest it's going to get is delta.
Well, since u minus v is less than delta, then 1200 u minus v is less than 1200 delta. Right? We proved that way, way back. Any questions? Okay, that finishes 3.5. So moving on to 3.6. So 3.6, we start off talking about a monotone function. Now we've talked about a monotone sequence. What's a monotone sequence?
It's when it's either step-by-step increasing or step-by-step decreasing.
It can't stay the same.
When it's constantly decreasing or constantly increasing.
So
or staying
it
the
was
same.
monotonically increasing if you had x of n plus 1 is always greater than or equal to x of n, right? The next term is always greater than or equal to the previous term. Was monotonically increasing, and monotonically decreasing was that, right? So now we're going to have a similar idea with a monotone function. So if u is greater than v, maybe say it like this. Let's spell it all out. So if we have f is a function from d to r, and we have 2 points in d where u is less than v, so v is the bigger of the 2 points, whatever they are, then it's monotonically increasing if f of u is less than or equal to f of v.
This is of Functions, not sequences.
Functions now. Notice it works for sequences because a sequence is a special type of function.
Right.
So this definition also works for defining monotone sequences. This is a more general definition for monotone. So if you have a bigger point in the domain, the further you are in the domain, we could have only increased or stayed the same. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So functions that either increase as you go to the right or stay the same.
So like sine functions are monotonically empty.
Correct. And then it was like this, and that was monotonically decreasing. So quick test. I have f from 0 to infinity by f of x equals the square root of x.
Monotonically increasing.
Monotonically increasing or decreasing? Square root makes it smaller, right?
Increasing.
Yeah, that's monotonically increasing. Let's try another one.
I don't know.
Is that monotonically increasing?
Oh, it's
It's
both.
both.
Yeah, it's monotonically increasing and it's monotonically decreasing, right?
Decreasing.
But when you plug in small numbers, they get really
It's
big.
neither. It's neither. Oh, it's
Oh, for that, I gotta get rid of the 0, sorry, because that's undefined. So
actually
you go like that.
decreasing.
Yeah, it's decreasing. Starts at basically infinity and works its way down to 0 pretty quick. Right? Okay, so that's what we mean by monotonically increasing, monotonically decreasing. Now we have the concept of strictly increasing or strictly decreasing,
What the
which
heck?
is this. That is strictly decreasing, and this is strictly increasing.
Okay.
I had to do this on our homework for 3.3.
Lucky you. So this function is strictly decreasing.
But we've
Right.
never done strictly increasing or strictly
It's the
decreasing.
same, it's a common strategy in textbooks to introduce you to the idea before you formally go over it.
Just like
it
our
made me so
polynomial.
confused because I could not find it anywhere in the book.
They told you what it was that did it.
I couldn't find it.
Well, if you get terminology and you don't waste your time looking in the book for it, just Google it.
I do.
Anyways,
I Google my proofs before I do anything.
we'll see how that treats you come test time.
I'll just use my Donnie Google.
Your Donnie Google. I hear that server's down.
Where did I use it last time?
10:30. Maybe I'll set you up for the next proof, and then we'll go on break, and then when you come back, watch the proof. So here's the next proof that we're going to do. Is f from D to R is monotone. I don't want to do. First off, what does monotone mean? It means it's either monotonically increasing or monotonically decreasing. That's what monotone means. Right? So this proof is going to be true for all monotone functions. We're just going to pick the monotonically increasing case and prove that. Okay? Instead of handling both scenarios, both monotonically increasing and then proving it for monotonically decreasing as well. You good with that?
Yeah, if it's one, then it's mono.
Is mono. So it's monotonically increasing. It's monotonically increasing. So if f from D to R is monotonically increasing and f of d is an interval, then f is continuous. So this is kind of a weird proof, which is why I want to set it up before we went on break. We're proving that, remember that we're proving that f is continuous here. So a lot of our proofs prior to this, throughout this whole chapter, we've been using continuous functions. We've been using the fact that f is a continuous function. Here we're proving that f is continuous. And now we have a couple ways that we can do that. We can show either it satisfies the epsilon delta definition or criterion, or we can just show that if we have a sequence xn and that converges to etc. So if we have some monotone function, we're only going to handle it for the monotonically increasing case. And if its image is an interval, remember f of d was shorthand for the image.
That is weird.
Or the range is another word that you've heard for it.
Wait, so if its range is an interval, does that mean its domain is an interval as well?
We didn't say anything about the domain.
I wish that is.
All we're saying is that its range is an interval and that the function is monotonically increasing.
Then it's continuous.
Then it's continuous.
Okay.
So if you have a monotone function whose image is an interval. We didn't say anything about the domain.
Actually makes total sense.
Yeah, I haven't seen it now.
Because like a sine function is gonna have an interval, but its range is gonna have an interval, but its domain goes up to the object.
But is that continuous?
The sine function? Yes,
Oh, yeah,
sine is
it is.
continuous.
Yeah,
But
but
it's
this
not
is
monotone.
continuous.
We're proving it's continuous. But sine is not monotonically increasing. This does not apply to the sine function.
I know. That's why I'm confused now.
So, yeah, this is a really weird proof, which is why I wanted to make sure it was very clear in your mind what exactly we're using and what we're proving. We're using the fact that it's monotone, and in our case we're going to have monotonically increasing, and the fact that the image is an interval.
Okay.
Then this function is continuous. So yeah, should seem kind of weird. It was really weird to me when I came across it. So that's what we're going to prove. So
Well,
you
there is a
understand-
definition.
you understand what we're trying to prove?
Yeah.
All right, so go on break, let's do it over. When you come back, we'll prove it.
believe it, 100%. In fact, I think some girls in our class did that.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
I could probably name them.
Yeah.
And I don't think I can name them on both of my hands.
Yeah. That's why I tell Dan that he's still this whole.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You gotta give it a few years. You gotta wait till they graduate.
It makes sense to me why all of the, a lot of the teachers have girls. That's hilarious.
Whatever. The guys just haven't figured it out yet.
The guys just have, oh, but the girls have?
Girls don't get husbands though.
What?
Pretty much every girl is gonna be like, there's not a bachelorette in this community past the age of 30. Unless, well, there is obviously the rare cases.
Girls are the ones that have control over whether or not they can marry the human population in general. It's far more common that there's a guy that reaches age 30 that wants to be married than there is a girl that reaches age 30 that wants to be married that's single.
Especially in this
Just
community.
the way the human population works. The guys are the ones that compete for the girls.
I've been thinking about what you said about human population. And you said that it's expected to taper off at like 9 billion.
Cap out at 11.
That was the lowest estimate I've ever heard was 9 billion.
9 billion.
It's the lowest estimate I've heard.
But everyone understands or thinks it will cap out eventually.
Yeah.
Which is so weird because of all populations, human populations should never taper out, never cap off. Why? Why would you? Because you just don't need people. Is it genetically programmed in our bodies to be like, this earth is populated enough, I don't need to create more than 2 kids?
Well,
Because the average, because after you said
look,
that,
if you're asking does it have to happen, the answer is no, it doesn't have to happen.
yeah, but it's going to happen. It's
But all the data says it will happen.
That's,
But that's messed up for the reasons I'm saying. It's messed up to me why the human population right now is the average child per family is getting lower and lower over the years.
that does not surprise me in the least.
That shocks me.
Dude, girls don't
Why?
have babies.
Why
Yeah,
are
you have that element to it where people are putting off starting families and you still have the natural biological clock that girls have. And so
Okay,
putting
but
off
I feel like these factors, you can't even talk about these factors because it's just the thing that happens. Like in every population growth that happens.
Well, most population growth, it happens as a matter of a restriction on resources. So, for example, there's often a cycle with it as well. So, you have a rabbit population and a fox population. If the fox population gets too big, the rabbit population gets really low. Then the foxes starve. So, the fox population gets really low, so the rabbit population can grow because they don't have foxes eating them anymore.
But
So, yeah, there's a lot of.
don't have limited resources at all.
Well, that's not true.
It's true.
It's not true. It's just not in the same way that foxes have it. Fact of the matter is, you live in a finite part of the universe with finite resources.
Okay, finite. I've always been told stop worrying about the finite resources. It's the dumbest thing. There's so many resources. We can get along for millions and millions and millions of more years.
Well, there are places in the world that have real shutdowns on things like their water because of how much population is using it. So
Right.
they have to go bucket their water from streams and they can no longer rely on their sewer systems because.
You're right about that. Some populations. There's no reason America, though, shouldn't just skyrocket in its population growth.
But yeah.
Well, I don't know that there's no reason.
Well,
I mean, obviously the infrastructure right now is not built to handle twice as big a population as what's currently handling. That would be a huge strain on America.
Yeah, but in 10 years it will be. Ideally, if. Obviously, America will grow as population grows.
Right, so
And it will meet the need.
if you have good natural growth, then yeah, that can be a great thing for society. And I'm not worried about overpopulation in the least. But
I'm not saying it needs to
there's
happen.
also the aspect of it, kids aren't dying anymore. People had 10 kids because 2 of those kids survived to adulthood.
That's sad.
It's true.
Now all your kids survive to adulthood. The expectation now is that your kids will outlive you. Whereas before, you were one of those rare kids that managed to get through it all and get to adulthood. And the expectation was that you have a kid, they're not going to live to see adulthood. And so you have to have enough kids for that to become a real expectation for your continuing family. The other aspect you have is less and less we rely on human labor to perform tasks. I mean, a child used to be viewed as an asset. Now they're viewed as a liability.
Oh,
Your child does nothing for you. They do nothing but cost you. Where before, your child was how you get your work done. You need your children to help you plant the crops, take care of whatever you need to take care of.
That's true.
That's where all your energy wasn't manpower. You didn't have electricity. You didn't have fuel. You need energy to get work done. It needs to come from people. And so either you have slaves or servants, or you have children.
But not even
And
that,
wives.
girls aren't even getting married, and they're not gonna wanna have kids unless they're married.
See, I don't understand this predicament.
What do you mean?
Why is the marriage rate lower?
I would 100% rather.
Girls aren't needed to be
Similar
provided
It's
for.
130 and find the one.
Similar thing. It's one of the problems that they have with so single mothers in predominantly black communities. It's been a big problem, and the problem's been getting worse and worse as more government aid has come through. So the thought process is, this poor single mom is taking kids all by herself. Let's give her some tax breaks. Let's give her some money to help her with that. Sounds good on its face, right? Her perspective, I get paid to be a single mother. Some of them, if they were to get married, or if they were to get a better paying job, they'd actually lose money in the process. Because qualifying for certain,
Financial aid.
not financial aid, kind of like financial
Well, what
aid.
I'm saying is like an act of financial aid.
Yeah, and aiding your finances a certain, what's the word for it? Oh my goodness, this is terrible. Did not sleep last night. Oh my goodness.
Government help, whatever.
Financial programs,
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah.
Like WIC and stuff.
Government assistance programs, yeah, stuff like that. Stupid commercials. I can't believe I can't
No,
remember
like-
the words, it's driving me crazy. Anyways, whatever the heck you call it. A lot of those programs, once people get past a certain income level, then they no longer qualify.
Right.
So, I don't know what the actual numbers are, but let's say I'm making $19,000 a year and the government's assisting me with an extra $5,000. But once I reach 20 grand, I no longer reach the cut. So I just lost $4,000 worth of income by making an extra $1,000 a year. So there's a motivation to be single mothers, have kids that way, that gets income coming into you from the government.
That's
While
a
at the
real
same
thing.
time not getting too high of a job. Yes,
The
it's a
government
real
will literally
problem.
pay $5,000 of.
Yeah, and not even.
Not
that.
necessarily 5,000. I've made up numbers, but
What I'm saying is they'll actually like consistently pay you. It's not like a limited time, like, okay, we'll support you for a year until you're better.
well, there are programs that do work that way, or used to. I don't know if they still do. I assume they still do, like unemployment. So there were people that would jump from job to job. They go get a job as long as they needed to have the job before they could qualify for unemployment. Then they get unemployment, or get paid to be unemployed. Supposedly while they're looking for another job. Once they no longer qualify for unemployment, they get employed again. And there's people that do that hop, unfortunately.
What's some freaking black holes?
Dude, there's also, I mean, not even that, you're getting compensated by the government, and if you're a single mom, you're getting paid by the husband as well.
Alright.
Yeah.
Possibly.
In
You
here.
could be getting paid by the husband.
Well, father, whatever.
Or father, yeah, not husband. Get paid by the father. So yeah, it's a real problem. came out of an idea to help people, and it just made the situation worse.
Dude, is this American strictly based, or do other countries do the same?
I'm sure. Oh, I almost had the word out there for you. Right there. Right about to say it.
These guys say it subconsciously, not consciously.
Crap. But yes, other governments have similar types of things. And as a general rule, the more socialist your government is, the more programs like that they have. So obviously a common one is universal health care, where everyone gets health care regardless of.
Which America isn't even that way, but many countries are.
No, America's not that way. Many countries are. And America, they're in a really crappy position right now. They're kind of getting the worst of both worlds. Because the crappy thing about universal health care is, if someone else is paying for your health care, you don't have to worry about paying for your health care. What aren't you going to get checked out?
What do you mean?
Anytime you have any health concern, go to the doctor.
Oh, right.
This kind of bugged me a little bit. Go get surgery. I don't have to pay for it. And so it holds up. You have just like an onslaught of people suddenly asking for medical services, and then the problem with that is emergency services are compromised in the process. So still, if you were in Canada and you were wealthy and you need emergency process done, you come to America. Because Canada can't sit here and say, oh, they're wealthy, let's put them ahead of everyone. That's not a thing anymore. And then you have to somehow rank order what's more severe and what's less severe. And I'm sure they do that to some extent, but you still have people who need emergency services done. Most people come to America to get that done because you can still get that done in
We
America.
don't have the long waiting list, is kind of what you're saying.
Right, we don't have the wait list, and then on top of that, as it becomes more socialist, there's a tendency to drive out the high performers in your society from it because they lose the income associated with it.
A doctor doesn't necessarily need to lose income.
They do. So even with Medicaid and Medicare that we use here in America, what happens is the governments are only willing to pay for so much of that. And so some hospitals, they actually will take a loss taking on that patient. And so what has to happen is private insurances have to be built more to compensate those losses. So if you have private insurance, you're actually subsidizing people on Medicaid and Medicare, on top of actually paying the tax that you pay for it. It's very retarded. I mean, I don't mind paying taxes to help people in a tough spot, but Medicaid and Medicare are applied so broadly. It's crazy.
Is that a government insurance?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Heather, I'm pretty sure was on the government insurance.
I would guess like 80% of our community is on one of those.
Why?
When they have a baby. Because it's free.
It's just after you have
If you're low enough income level, then you get it, then you qualify for it.
Oh, I see. So any housewife is gonna, well, I guess they're
Well-
single, like Heather's single,
Right.
with 6 children.
Right.
Well, not if you're single.
Dude, polygamy just scams the system.
That's one of the reasons that there's such pushback against it, is because, yeah, it's real easy to take advantage of the system with it. So, it's not good to do that, but at the same time, you gotta get by. Life's life.
Mr. J proposed that we just
Yeah,
have
healthcare
sister
for
wives,
women.
don't have sister wives, just be lesbian with each other. Like technically get married to each other. Then you can get tax benefits.
It's true. You could do that. Very true.
Yeah, Rebecca's healthcare is a joke.
Like the amount of money she has to pay
for
for
us,
it.
yeah. Because she has a job and she works hard and she makes a lot of money. So we have to use private insurance, which
Yeah.
is ridiculous.
So to have Boston, I think the whole process probably cost me like $6,000.
Like the actual birth and everything.
When it's all said and done, all the vaccines and everything we did for her, when it was all said and done, I probably ended up paying around $6,000 for it all.
Yeah, babies are expensive.
Yep. Whereas if you're on Medicare, you're paying next to nothing. Maybe when it's all said and done, $1,000, I don't know.
Yeah.
What does Michaela, or
6
what
grand
did
is
she do
like
for work?
a deductible.
Does she have an income?
She worked at +1.
Alright.
But I alone am already making some where don't qualify for any low income things. So.
Right. Well, my question really is, what
We're legally
happened to
married.
your bills when you had Boston? Like, did your expenses actually go up that much?
Not living expenses.
Living is what I'm wondering.
No, it's medical expenses are what's been through the roof.
Living isn't hardly anything, or what?
Well, you still have the
Yeah.
expenses of an extra baby. I mean, so you have to buy, like we'll be starting her on solids here in a second, so you have to buy that food.
Solid, like,
So I have to eat that, diapers, our joke.
yeah, I know, I saw it.
Yeah,
Where a diaper comes from us.
Like $27 for a pack. I was like,
Of diapers?
yeah.
Yeah,
Diapers are like
are expensive.
number one. That's why in all the baby showers, everyone is asked to bring diapers because they're expensive.
Yeah. Babies aren't cheap.
Sucks.
Like I said, now babies are a liability. They're definitely not an asset. Not gonna get time out of that girl.
Put it to work. You're to learn program earlier and then you start freelancing.
Oh my word.
I'm not worried about making money off my daughter. But she's probably gonna be upset not getting any money out of me.
Like, you won't pay her.
Like I won't pay for college for sure.
Oh, whatever.
Like that.
She won't be upset about any of that.
You don't know.
Guess it'll be a different
Well,
world.
times
We'll
change
have to
a
see.
lot.
What happens when she just gets college for free? And you
And-
don't pay for anything?
She won't. Oh, maybe. It could come to the point where we have universal education, like we have universal health care, but the way it's going now, the government's gonna expect me to pay for her education, and I'm not gonna. So she's gonna have to go pay for it herself. See, we're content paying for our own education, because we understand Dad can't. So we never had that expectation in our brain.
It's stupid if you can go to college for practically,
No, you want no
you
student.
can support yourself through college.
My cousin Becca,
Yeah, you can.
because she's part of the Mormon church, she can go to any university in Utah for free, basically. Yeah, she can go to BYU for free.
It's not for free.
Yeah. She
No.
says because she pays tithing and whatever, that because she's a Mormon, she can go to, her tuition is paid.
They backed it against your tithing, I didn't know that.
Yeah. She
Yeah,
goes-
I thought about
She can go to BYU.
BYU for a bit. You to go become a Mormon, because BYU, if you're a Mormon, it's like 1/3 the tuition or something like that. And it's not a bad school. So,
Yeah, if I want a music education, go become a Mormon.
go become a Mormon. Yeah, Mormons have great music education.
Thought about that, right? Double majoring in music.
In music,
I seriously had thought, like, 4 days thinking about
Thinking about what?
whether I should double major in music career. Dude, I believe Brother Hammond when he says that music is very special.
well,
Yeah,
here's one of the things you need to understand about music. Go back 100 years, 200 years, let's be safe.
And people hardly heard it.
No, go back 200 years. What do you have in your culture that expresses your culture?
Music.
You have music, you have art, and you have plays. That's kind of what you have. Nowadays we have so much more than that. The music does not control the culture like it used to. So, I don't know, some guys famous for saying, just let me write the music and I'll control the country, or something like that. Something to that effect. And in short, what he's saying is, let me control the culture of the country, and I'll in fact control the country. Music doesn't dictate our culture like it used to. It doesn't have the same sway that it used to. I mean, you probably find a lot of movies, for example, that are more impactful in your life than music in particular. But, so, I just don't think it holds the same sway over people that it used to, because there's so many different outlets now.
Yeah, but expressing it yourself is different than listening.
Yeah, but why would you go get a
Oh, you're
degree
saying-
in that?
Yeah, I'm not saying get a degree in like music therapy.
That's the only thing
I'm saying go to SUU and sign up for all their choir classes
and start singing.
like singing an instrument.
Playing the cello.
That sounds like a happy family to me, dude.
Whoa, oh my gosh.
Something in your family. All your kids learn to play the cello.
All of my kids can play the cello. I'd be happy.
Yeah, the kids are just.
And then one pianist. That'd be good.
Fatherhood is gonna be so hard, dude.
Oh my gosh.
Why?
Because I'm not as directed as I need to be.
Well, teaching
I don't know if
works.
that's the right word, but literally talk about everything that child is and is going to do. I'm accountable for almost.
Right, but
Like
if
I'm
you
like she's
parent
literally
them
gonna
correctly-
be he or she's gonna be the product of my fatherhood.
So are you saying you are not going to be able to teach her?
I'm saying I might not, or it scares me.
Then
Worse.
let's just hope that you have a good wife that is in order with you. And we'll teach you.
I'm not worried about not being able to give her the word, dude. I'm worried about not
Wife?
creating a connection with
Your kid or your
her. My
wife?
child.
Your child, are you, oh my gosh. You didn't need a connection.
Just need to give her the word now.
Yep, 100%.
Can you show her the word too?
Yeah, you definitely have a unique opportunity with children. To control exactly how they. I mean, that's your first like scheme relationship. There you are, you're nice and mature, and now you're gonna start out with this young thing that has absolutely no experience of you prior to that.
True. That's
no
actually
biases,
so
no
true.
prejudice. They're just coming into the world.
I wish I could have.
And you have complete control over that.
I wish I
Does
could
that
have known
not
my
sound
parents
like a lot of
before me.
fun?
How did I say it would be fun? It's terrifying though.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Here you are, little puppet master.
You ain't right.
I'm wrong.
I said you ain't right.
Well, you're worried about it, start teaching.
What, Annie?
Yeah.
Go get Walter. He's gonna become a deacon soon.
Oh my goodness. Kid. Can't believe how old he is.
Training Taylor.
Doesn't feel like it.
Yeah, it's just having kids.
Yeah.
Alright.
Dad's
They are gonna hold
Which is
you
good,
to
that's
that
an
spirit.
accomplishment.
Every time Dad sees one
Yeah.
where Dad says, "How old are you?" It's like 11. Oh, so you're almost deacon. Deacon's telling him, like, this is my last boy.
I know. What's he gonna do? Take care of his yard.
Wait,
He's gonna
really?
use his
He'd,
grandkids, dude.
hire his basement out to his kids or rent the basement out. That's what I
Your
see
dad
here.
has no
Have all the
idea.
ladies up top.
Your guys' youngest boy is 11 years old.
Yeah.
Our youngest daughter, sister is how old? 5 or 6?
And he's 6.
She's your youngest and she's 6.
Yeah.
Holy cow. What?
Yep, that's family's coming to an end.
I honestly think it's an accomplishment. Feels good.
I wish I could.
If I was in Dad's position, I'd feel really good.
It's time he got in the house for his family.
I know.
Now he doesn't have a family for his house.
Yeah, he seriously needs to just bring bodies around in a few years.
Just make bills. You
What are
take
you
care of my
talking about?
yard, I'll let
Then
you have my
grandkids.
basement.
Huh?
Yes. He's
Yeah,
got
every time I mow
grandkids.
Dad's lawn, I swear to you, I don't skip a freaking mow without thinking, I can't wait to teach my kid how to mow this lawn.
Your kid's gonna mow that lawn?
Hopefully,
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
if Dad's alive. in
Honestly,
20
trade
years,
into their
probably
11.
18 years.
Alright,
Saturday nights.
let's go through this proof. It's a little bit messy, but I think you'll get it all. And it's a little bit weird. So, like we said to begin with, we've got this monotonically increasing function. And we know that its image is an interval.
Right.
We're proving that it's continuous. Now, this is true for monotone functions. We just take monotonically increasing. So, pick some x naught in the domain, pick some xn that converges to x naught in the domain. We need to show that the limit of f of xn equals f of x naught, right? Now, for the sake of notation, rather than writing f of xn, I'm going to do yn. Rather than f of x naught, I'm going to do y naught. Okay. So, in other words, we're trying to prove that the limit of yn is y naught.
Right.
That's the same thing as the limit of f of xn equals f of x naught, right?
Okay.
Okay. So, to show that the limit of this is equal to this, what do I need to do? I need to show that for any epsilon, there is an index such that that distance less than epsilon from some index onwards, right? So let epsilon be greater than 0, and note that we need to find an index such that this is true from that index onwards. Okay? Notice that this being true is logically equivalent to this. So we need to find some index n such that this inequality is true and this inequality is true from that index onwards, and we'll be done. Right? Now, we're not going to do both of these. We're going to find an index so that this is true. You would also find an index where this is true, and then you take the max of those two indexes, and both of them will be true from that index onwards. You understand? So I'm just going to bother with this one, not going to bother with this one. Very similar things, right?
Okay.
So from here on out, remember, all I'm trying to prove is that there is some index such that from that index onwards, this inequality is true. And we're done. You with me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Notice if yn is always less than or equal to y naught, then that's true for every index.
Yeah.
Right? If this is less than or equal to that, then it's definitely less than that plus something. You with me?
Yeah.
So let's assume that this isn't always the case. That yn isn't always less than y naught. What does that mean? That means that there's some term called y star in yn such that y star is greater than y naught. If it's not less than or equal to, if it's not always less than or equal to y naught, then there has to be some term greater than y naught. You with me? Okay. And then, obviously, since yn is just the image of, well, I don't, never mind, that would be confusing. We'll leave that at that for now. Now, since fd is an interval, do you remember what it means to be an interval?
Yes. You have.
For any 2 points it contains every point between those 2 points.
Right.
So we know that the image contains y naught, and we know it contains y star. Therefore, it contains every point between those. So this interval is a subset of the image. So any point I pick in between these 2 points has to be in the image. And if any point I pick between these 2 points is in the image, that means there's an x that maps to it. That's what it means to be in the image, right? Okay. So now, I'm defining some y sub epsilon to be the minimum of y naught plus epsilon halves and y star, right?
Okay, hold on, not right there.
Remember our epsilon was defined way up here.
Okay.
I'm picking some number that I know is less than this thing. That's this. And then the y star that we had before, that's greater than y naught. So I'm letting this be the minimum of these two things.
Oh, okay.
And I know now that whatever this is, it's in this interval. You with me?
So what's the minimum between those two things?
The minimum of these two things.
What is it?
It's one of those two things, whatever's smaller. I don't know what y star is. All I know about y star is it's greater than y naught.
Oh,
That's all I know about y star.
yeah.
So take the minimum of these two things. So this thing could be less than y star, or this thing could be greater than y star, right? If this thing is less than y star, it's in this interval. If this thing is greater than y star, well then we're picking y star, which is also in this interval.
Right.
With me? Okay. So let y epsilon be the minimum of those two things, and notice that y epsilon is in the image. Because it's in there.
Yeah.
So it's in the image. Okay. So since it's in the image, then there has to be some x epsilon that maps to it.
Right.
And x naught is less than x epsilon, since this function is monotonically increasing.
Oh, true.
X naught is less.
Since y epsilon is bigger than y naught, x epsilon has to be bigger than x naught, because the function is monotonically increasing.
Yeah.
Okay. Since f is monotonically increasing, I said that. Okay, also since the limit of xn equals x naught, so remember, xn keeps on getting closer and closer and closer to x naught,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which means it's not getting closer and closer to x epsilon.
Mm-hmm.
X epsilon is bigger. So we have x epsilon here, x naught here. If we keep on getting closer and closer and closer to this thing, maybe we started out like this, right? But eventually we're getting closer and closer to this thing. Then from some index onwards, we're always less than this thing, right? We're always getting closer to this, and from some index onwards, we're always going to be less than this. That's what I'm about to say right here. So since the limit of xn equals x naught, which is smaller than x epsilon, then there's some index such that xn is less than x epsilon from that index onwards. You with me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and we're done. So then, f of xn is less than or equal to f of x epsilon is equal to y epsilon is less than that from that index onwards. So the index that we found right here is the index. Remember, that's what we were trying to do from the beginning. We were trying to find the index where this is true.
Okay, we explain the lane time again. The index where this is true. How is that the index where it's true?
Let's do high level re-going through the proof, and I think you'll connect it all. So remember, we're trying to show that this is continuous. So I have xn that converges to x naught. I'm trying to show that f of xn equals f of x naught, right? I redefined f of xn to be yn and f of x naught to be y naught. So I'm trying to prove that the limit of yn is y naught. That's what I'm trying to prove. Well, proving that the limit of yn is y naught is the same thing as showing that for any epsilon you pick, I can find an index n such that that distance is less than epsilon from that index onwards.
Right.
So I need to find an n where this is true. Finding an n where this is true is logically equivalent to finding an n where this is true.
Okay.
So I need to find an n where this is true and this is true.
Okay. Yeah.
From here on out, I said we're only going to find the n where this is true. We can do the same thing and find the n where this is true. We take the max of those two n's, and both of them are true from that n onwards.
Right.
So we skipped over worrying about this piece, and we just worried about this piece, right? Still need to find that n. Okay? And then we worked our way through. Query down, here's where we finally found the n. We said since the limit of xn goes to x naught, which is less than x epsilon, there has to be some n such that this is true.
Right.
That's the n that we were looking for. If there's an n where this is true, then that's the n where this is true. All this is true, which gives us the piece that we were looking for. Sorry, it's kind of a weird proof.
And by the way, I decided it does make sense. Because an interval contains all the
Points in between.
points in between.
Doesn't make sense to me only because, well, unless you can have an interval that goes off into infinity, can you?
That's what I want. Can you have an interval, or can you have a sequence in an interval that converges to infinity?
Can you have a
Or
sequence?
sorry, can you have a sequence in an interval that converges but is strictly increasing to something in that interval?
1 over x plus 1. Oh wait,
No, that
No, that's
decreases.
decreasing. So you need something like, let's think what we want. Let's see, we want n minus 1 over n. So that's in the interval 0 to 1. And it's always increasing. And it converges to 1.
Oh, that is so helpful.
Answers your question?
And it's strictly increasing?
Yeah. What's the first term in there? 0.
0.
We know 0. What's the next term in there?
I don't know. 1. Or not 1.
It's going to end at 1. What do you get when you plug in 2?
Oh, 2.
1 half.
1 half.
1 half. What do you get when you plug in 3?
2
2/3, 3/4.
That is really helpful.
And it keeps on getting closer and closer to 1. Okay, corollary.
All these.
Huh?
We're in 3.6, right?
Yeah. Let I be an interval and suppose
G6 is all.
function f from I to R is 1. F is continuous if and only if fi is an interval. Alright, let's wrap our heads around what this is saying. So we've got some function from an interval to R that's monotone. So it's either monotonically increasing or monotonically decreasing. We're saying that f is continuous if and only if its image is an interval. Okay? Now we already proved it this way. If its image is an interval, then it's continuous. That's this right here.
So this one's saying if it's continuous, then it has an interval.
So we already proved that with the proof over there. So we already proved the backwards case. We proved that if its image is an interval, then it's continuous. Now we need to show this way. If it's continuous, then its image is an interval.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure we already did that proof as well.
Why do we need that?
Well, the point is now these two things are logically equivalent. If fi is an interval, then the preceding theorem asserts that f is continuous, right? Conversely, the intermediate value theorem, as expressed in 3.14, asserts that continuous function whose domain is an interval, has its image. Yeah, we already did that. So that was theorem 3.14. So nothing to write. This is combining two other proofs that we already used. So this is 3.14. If you want to look at it. And then that one is this right here. So we already did a proof that if you have a continuous function from an interval, its image is an interval. And now we just really proved that if you have a monotone function whose image is an interval, then it's continuous. So I give you that. So it's continuous if and only if its image is an interval. You have a function from an interval that's monotone. It's continuous if and only if its image is an interval. Make sense? And I think you guys already understand. You remember what I meant by strictly increasing and strictly decreasing functions?
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
So then we'll jump to a function being 1 to 1.
Hey, we've already done this.
We have already done this. What does it mean for a function to be 1 to 1?
Every X input has a unique Y output.
That is what it means to be a function.
Every Y output has a unique X input.
Yeah. So, I'm trying to remember the way I like to say this. A function means that it's a function if x equal to y implies f of x is equal to f of y. Anytime you have the same output, you get, or anytime you have the same input, you get the same output.
1 to 1.
No, this is a function. So if you have a relation that satisfies this as a function, anytime you have the same input, it gives the same output. And then it's 1 to 1 if f of x equal to f of y implies x equal to y. Then it's 1 to 1. Anytime you have the same output, it has the same input.
I'm kind of confused. So,
Is it because I'm using y's?
yeah, because that's
Sorry.
So if X is equal to
Otherwise, work.
I like y better, but
well, the Y was throwing me off because it was an image. So if you have 2 points in a function equal to each other, then they're okay.
then the image of them is equal.
Okay, so it's exactly
And if you have two images equal, then the points were
for
equal.
both those to be happening, it's 1 or 1.
This is a function, this is 1 to 1 function. Or, not 1 to 1. Yeah, 1 to 1. Sorry.
Oh, that
I said 1 to 1.
one is 1 to 1.
This is what makes 1 to 1. This is what makes it a function. This is what makes it 1 to 1. Right? Because, let's do an example real quick. Maybe this is helpful. This is not a function. Because you have 1 goes to 2 and 1 goes to 3. So x1 is equal to x2, but f of x1 is not equal to f of x2. Not a function. Now if we switch this to a 4, or sorry, now if we switch this to a 3, it is a function, right?
Yes.
But now it's not
1 to 1.
1 to 1. Because
2 equals 2, but 1.
f of 1 is equal to f of 2, but 1 is not equal to 2. So it's not 1 to 1.
Okay.
That's the way I like to
So
think
both
about
conditions, right.
functions and 1 to 1 functions. Make sense? Another way that you can think about 1 to 1 is the inverse is also a function. If the inverse is a function, then it's still a function. So here we have this function. Let's look at its inverse.
2
Its inverse is 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2. Is that a function?
Nope. 2.
No, it's not, because 2 goes to 1 and 2 goes to 3. That's not a
That's the
function.
way Ariel described it.
So, since the inverse isn't a function, then it's not 1 to 1. I don't like thinking about it that way as much. I think that's cleaner, but just my own predilections. let's see. So let's look at the author's definition. A function f from D to R is said to be one-to-one, provided that each point y in its image f for each point. All right, let's try this out. I guess I'll just go over here. Definition. So f from D to R is 1 to 1. From here on out, I'll probably just do 1 to 1 like this, so don't be confused when I do that. Provided that for all y in the image, all y in the image, there's this one and only one x in D such that f of x is equal to y. Does that make sense? Have you guys seen that explanation notation before this?
Yeah.
There exists one and only one, instead of just there exists.
You've done proofs in the past using that.
Huh?
You've done proofs in the past using that.
Well, all right, there it is. For function f to be one to one by definition, if y is point, there's exactly one point x in D such that f of x equals y. Okay, and then we have an inverse function. And we only define an inverse function on a function that's one-to-one. So if you have a one-to-one function, f of x is equal to y, then we define the inverse function. Let's see. If f from D to R by f of x equal to y is one-to-one, then f inverse is a function from f of D to R by f inverse of y is equal to x. So I think you're already pretty familiar with what we mean by an inverse function.
Is this a different definition or what? What's that button?
Huh?
Oh.
So-
If that's the case.
Maybe draw a picture real quick. So here's D, the domain, right? Here's R.
Where else?
R is massive. And F is a function that maps from D, and it maps over, not into all of R, but it only uses some of R probably, right? So here we have F of D. You with me so far?
Yeah.
So then F inverse, and D over here is going to be some subset of R, right? F inverse is a function from FD to R. So F is from D to R, F inverse is from FD to R.
But how can FD be greater than or less than R if it's mapping?
FD is a set.
Right, but still the inverse of it now maps into R.
Inverse of it.
Okay, we map D to R. Now the inverse is to map FD.
Well, we map D to some subset of R
Oh, right.
called FD. This is the whole image,
Right.
whatever it is.
And then now we're mapping.
FD, we're mapping the image
To the whole real numbers.
to the real numbers.
So it's not a function.
It's a function.
To the whole real numbers?
It didn't use all the real numbers. Neither did F.
Oh, it's pointing to D?
So F here is from D to R, right?
Okay.
F inverse here is from F of D to R.
Yeah, but you get.
You don't have to use a whole set, you just have to use a subset of them.
But you'll get a different outcome, plugging it into the function.
I'll get a different outcome. I don't know what you mean by that.
Take the image and plug it into the function, gives you different Y's. Or different, gives you, so you take the image, FD, and you plug it back into the function, will give you a different image.
Then your original domain.
Yeah.
You're saying I take an X out of here, I map it to a Y in here,
And then you
then I map it back to an X here, and I'll start out somewhere different than where I started?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what
No,
he's saying.
no, no.
That's what he's
Well,
saying.
I'm
You're
saying-
saying.
I'm saying you take an X from here,
Okay.
bring it to here,
So now you
and
have
then you
F of
take
X
that
over
Y, then you take whatever number that gives you, and then you map it, you plug it back into F.
here. No, you don't plug it back into F, you have to plug it into F inverse.
And you get a real number when you should get the original domain.
What do you mean you don't know what
I
F
don't know what
inverse
F inverse is.
is? It maps FD, look. Alright, let's write down a really concrete example.
Yeah,
Let's get crazy with it.
very.
I don't think I didn't understand that.
F equals a function 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4. Okay? F is a function from 1, 2, 3 to the real numbers. Right?
Yeah.
What's F inverse?
Now, before we continue, what is F of 1, 2, 3?
2, 3, 4.
Jeez. 3. That is equal to 2, 3, 4, right? Okay. Now what's F inverse? F inverse is 2, 1, 3, 2, 4, 3.
Well, why'd you put that bigger box in the real numbers? Oh, because now we're mapping it to the real numbers. Okay.
F inverse is a function from
2, 3, 4 to the real numbers.
2, 3, 4 to the real numbers, right?
I see what you're saying now.
And what is 2, 3, 4? That's F of 1, 2, 3. Right? So now if I replace that 1, 2, 3 with a D, as I will call that just D is a set 1, 2, 3, then this is a D. And this over here is just F of D. Right? Okay. So that is an inverse function. And maybe we'll call it there. And we'll finish 3.6 and then do 3.7 next time.
Okay.
So just so you are all